welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast. I'm Pete Wright, and here, as always, with Nikki Kinzer.
Hello.
Hello, Nikki.
Hi, Pete Wright.
Tell me what you're drinking.
Right now, I'm drinking water.
Oh.
But
that's not as exciting.
It's not. I decided to try tea.
Okay.
Because you hear all of these wonderful things about green tea.
Yes, you do.
And I love the idea of tea. I was telling my husband this morning, I'm like, I just love the whole routine of tea, the ambiance the tea gives you. You know, like I got my tea kettle out, and because I used to have a tea kettle just as decoration, but never used it because we don't drink tea.
Right.
And so I got it out. I put the hot water in it. And I listened for the whistle because that's always fun, and heard the whistle, and I put the tea in the cup, and I put the little tea bag in there, and it's just all really nice, right? I mean, it's just this really soothing, calm, zen feeling.
You've got the environment right so far. That's good.
Right. And the smell is okay. I mean, I'm not minding the smell. And I put some honey in the tea because I know I need to sweeten it up. I just know myself well enough. I'm going to have to sweeten it up a little bit. And I'm all excited about this tea because I haven't had tea in a long time. And I've always said I don't like tea, but I'm going to try tea because, I haven't been feeling well. And I tried the tea and I got this ew, yeah, So it sat on my desk for probably an hour, and now I'm back to water. I want to like tea.
Well, okay.
I really want to.
Listen, you need to give it more of a chance than that. Because what kind of tea did you? You said it's green tea. Like what kind of?
It was organic chai green tea.
Okay.
I don't know, it's from Safeway, I think.
All right. Well, you got to try some different. I would recommend you start with something a little bit more naturally palatable, which is like a sweet. Or not a sweet, but a fruit tea or something like that. One of my very favorites is Celestial Seasonings has a or maybe it's not, maybe it's Stash, maybe it's Stash or Taza. They have a pomegranate white green tea, and that little addition of the fruit, to me, it softens some of the more bitter kind of the green tea part. And I also think that starting with the chai, I mean, that's a very natural chai spice. It's not going to be something that is, it ain't no Starbucks, right? It's a much more sort of, let's just say robust chai spice, and probably not something that's quite so easy on your palate if you haven't been drinking a lot of tea. So you really go back and get something that's just a basic tea and see what you think. I do exactly the same thing. I put a little spoon of honey and the tea bag, and I end up really liking it, but I tend to go for the fruitier teas, the black tea mango, it's mango black tea. I love pomegranate, the black cherry, like all of these kind of fruits, I think really make it a better experience.
Well, then I'm going to keep trying because I really don't want to give up on tea. I really don't. I really like the thought of it.
Today, we are talking about connections, the importance of connection. But before we do that, make sure you head over to TakeControlADHD.com and get to know us a little bit better, the show a little bit better. If you're listening to this on Facebook or Twitter or Pinterest and you haven't explored the show, you can listen to the show right there on the website, or jump over to iTunes and subscribe for free. It's the best way to ensure you don't miss an episode. Connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at TakeControlADHD, or call us, leave us a voicemail at 503-664-4ADD, 503-664-4ADD, and get your voice and your thoughts and your questions on this very show. We would really love to hear from you. So,
I tested that. I tested the recording.
How'd it work?
It was good. It was funny because I wanted to hear what you had to say. And one of the things that you said was, do we have permission to use your voice? And so I made a little joke, and I said, of course you have permission. It's Nikki Kinzer. You hear my voice all the time. Ha, ha, ha. Ha, ha, ha. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure it worked. And, how did I know if people called in and stuff? So, but yeah, it's very cool. It's very clever. So yeah, definitely. Excellent. Leave a message because it'd be fun to hear somebody that's not me.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're just going to call yourself every couple of days.
I know, right?
And one last thing, registration for small group coaching is open. You can head over to the website and sign up, review the groups we have coming up, and register to get a spot in these small groups.
Yes, and I'm going to talk more about that today too.
Excellent.
That ties into this connection piece.
Well, let's do that then. Let's jump on in. What are you thinking about when you're thinking about connections?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what happened and how this all kind of started is, like I said, I've been sick the last week. And so I've been in bed, and you can only watch so much TV and so many movies, to just drive you crazy. So I started doing some research, and I started watching some webinars and some TED Talks and just reading some new material. And a few things really caught my attention this week that I want to talk about. And of course, I can't talk about all of it in one episode because that would just be a really long episode.
Because you were sick for a really long time.
Exactly. So I'm going to spread it over the next few shows. But the first thing I want to talk about today is I listened to a webinar for ADHD moms. And I'm going to talk about this webinar, a couple of things that I learned from the webinar, and then how it ties into these group coaching things that I want to, or groups that I want to put together. The second thing I want to talk about are these two TED Talks that I watched, and they are from Brene Brown, and she talks about shame and vulnerability.
She is amazing.
She is amazing. Really. And it's interesting because I'm watching these things, and I know that in the last few shows, you and I have made some comments about, the topics aren't really as positive as they should be, or, have been in the past. And we're almost kind of apologizing for it if you go back and listen. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching her talk about shame and especially vulnerability. And I'm thinking, well, why did we make those comments? Like, what is the connection there about what she's speaking about, and what makes us feel uncomfortable about having these hard conversations? There's something there I want to explore more about. So we're going to talk about it. I'm going to we're going to go there, Pete.
Okay, let's go there.
So after I watched her talks, of course, I was interested in buying her books, right? And so I bought two of her books. The first one that I'm reading right now is The Gifts of Imperfection, Let Go of Who You Think You're Supposed to Be and Embrace Who You Are. And then the second one that I bought was Daring Greatly. And I'm almost done with the first one. So I know for sure I'm going to have some things to say about that. I don't know yet about Daring Greatly because I'm just going to kind of see how it, where I go with all of this, if I want to read it or... I
thought Daring Greatly was the better one.
Oh, you do?
I
okay.
Did, yeah, I read them both, and I think Daring Greatly is fantastic. Now
I'm going to have to read it.
Now you have to read it, yeah.
And we'll be talking about that one too. But this week, I wanted to start with this webinar for ADHD moms and the importance of connection, because it really does tie into the group coaching services. And because it's open enrollment, it's perfect timing, I think, to talk about it. This webinar was hosted by Helen Littman, and the title of the webinar was called Survival Strategies for Moms with ADHD. And this immediately caught my attention because of the group that I want to form with ADHD moms. It's sponsored by Attitude Magazine. And so in our show notes, I'll have the link to her website so you can check out what she does. And then also the link to Attitude Magazine to their webinars, because they really do have some fantastic topics. So I encourage people to go and look at that as a resource. So we'll have those in the show notes. So anyway, going back to this webinar at the beginning, what she does is she provides a lot of education around ADHD and how it affects moms. And she basically has different examples around the cognitive, emotional, physiological, and behavioral regulation issues that moms deal with. And some of the examples that really jumped out at me, which I see a lot with my clients, were the disorganization issues, trouble with really having just basic household management, like routines, sticking to routines, chores, things like that. I see a lot of people struggle with paper, with mail, and then with their time, right? Because they're constantly running late, and it's just kind of this rush all the time. She also talks about unreliable memory. I see that with clients of, being distracted, forgetting where things are put. And then there's always this kind of sense of forgetting something, which of course causes a lot of stress and anxiety, right? I mean, 'cause you're just constantly thinking you're forgetting something and you're frustrated. And then of course, sleep issues when you're a mom or a dad and have kids and you have, didn't get a good night's sleep. I mean, you're asking for disaster for the next day. I mean, you're irritable, you're quick to get maybe angrier than what you would normally get, crankiness, all of this stuff. But one of the things that she said that was really interesting to me of how ADHD can affect moms is the estrogen levels that the hormones that we have as women.
Right.
And how that affects your ADHD. And actually this is being studied more by researchers who they're starting to find this connection with hormones and ADD. And what she goes on to say is that could be, one of the reasons why ADHD doesn't usually show up in girls until they've hit puberty. And it's also could be one of the reasons why symptoms for women, they sometimes feel like their ADHD gets worse when they're going through menopause as they get older. And so it's just really an interesting connection to me. And, she couldn't really answer exactly what that connection is because it's still new and they're still trying to kind of figure out what's going on here. But to me, I think it's good to know. I mean, it's good to kind of see that there might be a relationship there that we need to be more aware of.
Sure.
Now, some of the other things that I see with my clients with ADHD and having that mom rule is they try to live up to this high standard, and it leaves them feeling, really less than whoever it is that they're comparing themselves to and not good enough. And so there's always this kind of doubt that they have around themselves. Like, I should be doing this. This should be easier. And they're beating themselves up over and over again. And it's just this terrible, bad cycle. And it can really be toxic to your quality of life. And she even uses the word toxic. And, I've seen it. I totally believe that that's true. Now she says even at the very beginning of the talk that by stating, or she states that many of the parenting books and advice that is out there are not geared for moms with ADHD. And so it's not as easy and simple as just putting a list together and following it. And so, you have a parenting book and you think that, well, I should be able to do this. And again, it's just this bad cycle because it's hard and it's frustrating and it just doesn't come easy. Her first kind of survival tip was basically to acknowledge your ADHD and to seek treatment for it. And she talks about different ways to do this, and we know this. There's therapy, coaching, medication, support groups. And the message to me was very loud and clear as I was listening to the webinar that this is not something that people have to go through alone. It's not your sole burden to carry, is what she said. And I just thought that was beautifully said, because I think so many times we do feel like we're alone. And so just to kind of have that message there that, nope, you can get help and that's good. In the webinar, and this is where we talk about connection, the conversation went on to how there's this huge amount of value in connecting with other like-minded women who are experiencing the same things that you are. So you don't feel alone. You don't feel like it's just me or I'm broken or I am less than. It is your ADHD. There's other women that are dealing with this too. It's just the way that your brain is wired, and that's it. It doesn't make you bad. It doesn't make you not worthy, or any different than anybody else. It just makes it a little harder. Right. And so being aware of that and accepting that and being with other people that are dealing with the same thing can really make a big difference. I know, and many mothers, including myself, feel like no one could possibly understand how hard some of this stuff is. Right. And
even just day to day, like being a mother.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like when I was going through when I shared my experience with my son in his math class, I mean, I know that seems trivial to some, with some, there's much bigger issues in the world than that. But at the same time, when I was going through it, I was like, this is so hard. Yeah. Why is this so hard? What am I doing wrong? And you start blaming yourself.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up a point earlier that I think is really interesting about what we compare ourselves to. And I think it goes both ways. Like on one hand, you compare yourself to the standard that is set for you. Either that's your mother or, a sibling or the mothers in your community. Like there's always a grass is always greener kind of standard that is set for who you should aspire to be. And I say that heavily in air quotes, right?
Yeah.
Who you should aspire to be is no one beyond who you are right now. now. Just be the very best you can be, that sort of a thing. But it's magnified when you're dealing with your kids, because suddenly it's, their life is your responsibility for this time. And when they're going through trouble, it doesn't matter what the trouble is, really, whether it's math class or, social difficulty or, whatever it is, Cub Scouts, who knows? What it is, your failure as somebody who, has responsibility over them. And we are so bad at dealing with sorrow and kind of being present in that space enough to recognize to recognize possible solutions, that's where we feel pain. And I think that's a really it's a difficult place to live.
Well, and it was interesting because as I was thinking about this show, and I was thinking about this fear of judgment, right? I mean, that's really what a lot of what it is that we kind of fear that if we talk about this stuff or we talk about how we're feeling, that we're being judged in some way. And I was thinking about it, and I thought, the reality is there are people that are judging us. And there are people that will judge you. And so it's really a matter of how do we respond to that and how to deal with that.
How do we feel about the prospect of being judged?
Right.
And what is our responsibility to that judgment? Like I say it to myself all the time, like their judgment of me is their opinion and theirs alone.
Right.
That has nothing to do with my reality and my space and my life. And the more I recognize that, the more liberating it feels. That does not at all discount how difficult it is to liberate yourself from it. It's really difficult.
Yeah. But I think what you're saying is, the first step to doing that is actually recognizing that, what do I have control over? What don't I? And how am I going to respond to this? Just recognizing it. I know it doesn't make it easy, but recognizing it and, thinking it through, I think is better than really just kind of sitting in it.
Well, and this was something we talked about before, I think, which is this idea that, how easy is it for others to let their stress influence you? Right? How easy, I think about this all the time. Whose stress am I feeling right now? Is it my stress? Is it my anxiety? Or is it on behalf of someone else? My wife, my kids, a client? Am I taking on their stress and letting their stress fuel my anxiety, their judgment fuel my anxiety? And I have to ask myself, who's the dummy in this situation? It's always me. I am always the dummy. Because I'm the one letting somebody else's anxiety and stress be my anxiety and stress. And that's empathy can be very, very powerful and a force for good, but it can also be a force for great evil when it causes you such pain. And so that is, I think that's really at the core of this sort of shame and vulnerability piece. It's this idea of who are we letting influence us and how we feel about ourselves right now today. Because that feeling, coming to terms with that recognition, is what gets in the way of you being the best mom that you can be, or me being the best dad that I can be. I'm always thinking about how someone else or some other fictitious parent of mine, because it's not my parent. My parents don't sit in judgment. I'm making up this fact that they sit in judgment of me. That's in my head.
Right. You don't know for sure.
Yeah,
exactly.
Of course not. Yeah. They're not here sitting in judgment over me. But what I can tell you is that impression, when I let that be dominant, the dominant force in my parenting, it gets in the way of making good decisions on behalf of my kids.
Yeah. I remember talking to a mom once, and we were having a similar conversation of sort of what she was living or what she was trying to live up to, and who she was comparing herself to. And she had some answers. She had some real answers. She knew exactly who she was comparing herself to and where that was coming from. But my question to her then was, well, what do your children think? Do they know that you love them? And she paused and probably felt like what you just, how you just sighed, and she kind of stopped for a second. She's like, well, of course they know I love them. And then it really was a conversation of what else matters, really what else matters. If your kids know and they're being taken care of, they know they're being taken care of, they know that you love them with everything that you have, then why does that other person's opinion make a difference? What's the value in their opinion versus the value of what your kids think? It's crazy. But we all get wrapped up in that. I get wrapped up into it all the time. We all do,
Of course.
It is part of it.
It's because of our natural, empathy is a natural human state. It's easy for us to take on kind of the expressive qualities of others. And that is a challenge as much as an opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, and going back to the connection piece, and what she was talking about in the webinar, and how this really ties into what I'm trying to do with the group coaching, is that the reality is people do understand where you're coming from. They are usually going through the same things or very similar things, and they can relate to you. You're not by yourself. And I think that, one of the things that I think we get stuck on sometimes is that if we ask for help, then that means that we're weak or we're not capable. And one of the things that I learned from Brené Brown is shifting that way of thinking, that asking for help is actually very courageous. It's not a sign of weakness at all. It's a sign of being brave enough that you're willing to do the work to get the life that you want, and really shifting that thinking of weak to really it's bravery. It's about being brave.
I loved that. And I loved so much of her, her aha moment was the same as my aha moment listening to that experience, which was when she comes around and talks about when a man comes up to her at the end and says, I know you talk a lot about women and this idea of vulnerability and power and empowerment, but really, I just want you to reflect a little bit on the importance of this very topic with men. And that was a kick in the gut for me, because it really is. It's that same issue. It's power and bravery and figuring out and having the courage to face the things that cause you difficulty, and not just bury it and hide from it. And, and being able to face and face your family in difficult situations. It is an amazingly powerful story.
One of the many reasons why I love coaching is that connection piece. And, whether it's between me and the client on a one-on-one basis or with group coaching, it's the connection between several people. And so my intention, and how this kind of all relates to what I'm offering and connection, what my intention for the group coaching, not only for the ADHD moms, but also for the professionals as well, is to build a community for people to connect and feel safe about exploring some of these things that we're afraid to talk about, where we can learn and grow from each other, and acceptance is just sort of a given, and there is no judgment. I don't want people to feel like they're being judged in any way. But something that I want to talk about with group coaching, and also it really doesn't matter what kind of coaching I do, I want to be clear about something that I think sometimes is not understood. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Lay it on me.
So group coaching and individual coaching, or even college coaching with college students, it's not just about how to do something better. It's not just about the strategies. And I think that there's probably some people thinking, well, wait a minute. You talk about tips all the time. This podcast is full of ideas and suggestions. I wrote a book on organizing, and I will certainly continue to share my experiences, with what I've seen work and not work, and strategies are important, but there's a time and a place for them. And that's what I mean by this, is that I think that sometimes people want to jump right into the strategies, but there's something that has to happen first in order for those strategies to work. And that is, really understanding what's getting in your way of making this stuff work, because the knowing how to do something is really not the issue, because I can probably tell you that many of my clients will come to me already knowing what it is that they have to do, or what they're looking to do, or what they would like to do, because there's plenty of information out there on how to do something, right?
Sure.
The how-to isn't really a mystery.
Right.
The mystery is trying to figure out what's getting in the way. And those are having these conversations that we started to kind of talk about with fear and shame and vulnerability and these things that Brené Brown, that she brings up. And what I see are these limiting beliefs that people have about who they are and how they think and what they think they're capable of, what they believe they can, or especially what they believe they can't do. And so then it's challenging these beliefs and really asking, how are they serving us? these are the conversations that I want to have. And these are the conversations that need to happen, I believe, first before we get into the how-to. And you can do that with the connection of other people because they have the similar stories, the similar situations, the feelings and things like that. Once we can kind of zero in what the source is, what's happening, then together we can really start exploring some of the different strategies and the how-tos, right? It makes more sense then at that point. And for trying to figure out what's worked for people, what hasn't, what are they willing and open to do now, all of those things. So really, in summary, giving you the how-tos before you kind of do the hard work, the conversations that I want us to have, is really only a temporary solution. It's a Band-Aid, and the bleeding is going to continue to happen unless we really get to the source. So I think it's important that people understand that. I don't want you signing up for this group, thinking that it's just going to be all how-tos. I really want to get to the meat of stuff. I mean, that's my goal, and have it really be a safe place for people to express themselves and hopefully get a lot out of it.
Well, that is wonderful. I'm very excited for this next round to get started. Classes start, or the groups start in April. Sign up and get your spot reserved and get ready to take on the real issues. Anything else? Any final words of wisdom? Or are you ready to wrap this thing up?
I think I'm ready to wrap this one up, but I'm going to be ready next week.
I know. We're going to jump into Brene Brown. I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
Oof.
Me too.
I need to go watch those videos again.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thanks everybody for listening and downloading. Don't forget, check us out. Subscribe for free on iTunes. And you know what? By the time you hear this, if you find that it's not natural for you to jump to iTunes and check your latest podcasts, or jump on the web, we're going to start sending out a weekly email update that just says, here's the latest episode. It's posted. You can get it right now, just to remind you that it's there. We've had some folks who've mentioned that they would like that, and so we're going to give it a shot. And you can subscribe for that mailing list right on the front page of the website. We would love you to make sure you join the list and be the first to know when a new episode of the ADHD podcast has gone live. Thanks, everybody. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next week on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.